Hey everybody, welcome to From the Hangar, episode 22. And as the title says, we are sitting in an hangar, and that's one of the cool things about being in a Mission Aviation Fellowship podcast. We have planes and a hangar and a cool set that we can do this in. So I am sitting here with Ryan and Annabel Koher, who have been with MEF for several years now, and they have a very unique story to tell. If you guys are not familiar with that, we will definitely dive into that. So with that, maybe we can just get started. So
Sounds good.
Ryan and Annabelle, why don't you guys just introduce yourselves and tell us who you are and maybe how long you guys have been with MAF, and let's just start there.
Yeah, hello, my name is Ryan
And
Koher.
I'm Annabelle.
So we've been with MAF for about 6 years, and we are a pilot mechanic family assigned to the country of Mozambique.
Yeah, and I love that you guys said it that way, that you are assigned to Mozambique. It's very key if you guys don't know the story. So you guys are teasing this a little bit. But before we dive really into that, maybe the aspect of your guys' time with MAF, like I kind of want to just like ask what got you guys into mission aviation and overseas ministry work in general. Yeah, maybe you guys can, Annabelle, how do you start? Like what really got you interested in going overseas?
Yeah, when I was 15, I was babysitting some kids, and I took them to an outside VBS. It was like at a neighbor's house in the neighborhood. And as I'm like watching from the background, what's going on, I sense the words of, "This is what I want for you to do." And I knew it was ministry. It wasn't necessarily that VBS ministry, but it was just ministry in general.
Oh, interesting.
And so I spent some time praying and talking with like leaders and people who mentors in my life, and my mom, and trying to figure out what exactly God had in store for me.
Okay.
And so what it came down to was, what has God given me a passion for? What do I have a heart for? And I have a heart for the poor and homeless, for kids, and for just culture and overseas missions.
Really? Okay.
But I'd never been on a mission trip yet.
Yeah.
And so I had connected with one of the dads that I babysit his kids, and he had recently gone to India, and I was able to go on a trip with his church to India when I was 18, right before I turned 18.
Okay.
And that I was sold.
That's awesome.
Like,
so where
missions.
did you grow up? I should probably put that setting into people's minds. Like, where was that you grew up?
I grew up in Long Beach, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So I'm just like thinking West Coast and great weather, and
Yep.
here you are like doing VBS with children, and like God telling you, ministry work, this is where I want you to be, kind of thing. Was that like an exciting feeling, or was that like, oh, I don't know, God, like this is fun, but I don't know if I want to do this full time?
I was excited.
You were?
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. I think in a way, sometimes God really forms someone in a way that's like, I'm going to prepare you for something, and you're going in the way that you're going to really get excited and love. And so it's just really cool to hear that. So thank you for telling that. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, so when I was about 5 years old, I remember giving my life to Christ. I didn't know everything at that time, but that was a good starting point.
Really? I mean, come on, 5, you should have pretty much.
Our 5-year-old thinks he knows everything, but
that doesn't go away until probably in your late 20s.
Yeah. So growing up in the church, I also felt convicted to have a ministry or a career that was furthering the kingdom of God in some way, in a full-time regard. So like being a missionary or something like that. I also loved travel. I loved places and, seeing things that were just out of the ordinary. I grew up in Southern California also, in Riverside and in Crestline.
Wow.
And yeah, I traveled all over the Western US with my dad, and that was just really, yeah.
And what was the nature of all those traveling?
Mostly just weekend trips and stuff.
Yeah.
He had a Jeep, so we'd go off-roading places and
That's
stuff
awesome.
like that. So yeah, my love for traveling kind of came out of that. So I think that combined with my desire to do ministry just kind of put me on a missionary trajectory.
Sure. Yeah. And was aviation something that you found that you loved, or was that something you kind of fell into as well?
Yeah, that's another thing that I really loved. I'd gone on a few flights, like commercial airline flights, as a kid, and I just absolutely loved it. Again, just seeing things from a different perspective, and just the feeling of lifting off the ground and being up in the air was just, amazing to me. So, as a teenager, I wanted to be a pilot of some sort also.
Okay.
And of course, I didn't know how these things could work together. I was like trying to figure out, should I be an airline pilot? Should I join the military and be a pilot? And, those doors kind of seemed very far away and closed at that time. So I was kind of confused about, what should I do with my life? And one day a MAF missionary came to our church and gave a presentation about, what MAF does overseas and, how they help people and fly missionaries and bring the gospel to places and fly translators and freshly translated Bibles and stuff like that. And, I remember walking away from that service that Sunday knowing exactly what I want to do with my life.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, that started me on the path towards MAF.
That's great. And so you guys both grew up in Southern California. You both got separate calls, but essentially, you got the calling to go overseas missions and ministry work, but like separately, not together. And where did you guys meet, and how did that come to play, your guys' calling?
Yeah, we so my family moved up to Crestline, where Ryan had been living when I was in college, and I was commuting to college. And I was looking for a weekend job, and there's a Christian camp on the mountain, and I got a job working in the kitchen there, which Ryan was already working at in between his training and his work, as he was doing maintenance work at that time.
Okay.
So in between his maintenance jobs and training for his pilot licenses, he was working in the kitchen. And so that's where we met. Ended up also going to the same church that he was going to at the time. Okay. And so it, our paths crossed and we just formed a friendship and realized that we both had a call to missions, and
you had a call to each other.
Yes. Oh, there we go. And I think it was good too, because I never had a specific calling in missions, trying to figure out, is there a certain place? Is there a certain field of work for missions organization? I was having trouble figuring out what after college was going to look like for me.
Yeah.
And so I think it really wasn't until we came through and did candidacy here, and we were writing out our stories and figured out, God had given me the call for missions in preparation for joining Ryan in the full calling that he had given him of mission aviation.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, that's so cool. That's great. But you mentioned you have a heart for inner city as well, and people who find themselves in homeless situations, and children specifically. That's a really great. It's a great calling to have a heart for that.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking of my time in Mozambique too, that there's a lot of opportunities to reach out to children who may not have the same fortunate, I don't know, upbringing as for us in the States, but also even people who live in Mozambique who might be a little bit more, was it wealthy, I guess is trying to say, but yeah, there's a lot of children in need out there. And so,
there's a lot of poverty in Mozambique. I know at one point, I'm not sure the current statistics, but at one point Mozambique was the poorest country in the world.
Yeah.
So
I think it's down to the fifth or sixth poorest country.
Okay.
So, something like that.
And was Mozambique something you guys specifically asked MAF to assign you to, or did you when you guys were going through candidacy, just we're open to go to anywhere, and that's kind of where they assigned you?
Yeah. So they, so the way MAF does it is they, all the regional directors, like the Africa regional director, the Indonesia, Latin America, they all come and present their regions and their programs all the MAF programs in their region, what they do, what life is like on the team, just briefly. So they present all that to you, and then they give you a paper that says, this is like 6 years ago. I don't know if they changed it, but the paper would say like, okay, which countries do you want to go to the most? Which do you not want to go to the most? What are the reasons? And what are your schooling desires, homeschool or boarding school or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's actually a really important question to ask. I'm glad they have that on that sheet. I didn't know they did that.
All this stuff helps MAF find a great fit for each family. And there's also, they ask you what other, ministries do you want to get involved in outside of MAF if you want to, or if you have time.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of get to see where your heart is and where would be a good fit. So we put Mozambique and Indonesia as our top two. We liked the aspect of Indonesia because it's a really big program. There's a lot of activity and flights and excitement.
Sure.
And it's a big team, so we could just kind of go into a big team and kind of just be there with them.
Yeah.
Learn from the people on the team because it's well established.
Mozambique, on the other hand, we put first because it was a small team. So I guess we didn't really know what we wanted. But we liked the small team aspect of being a key player in a team rather than just one of the 15 pilots or whatever.
Yeah.
So we kind of like that aspect of the small team. Professionally, it was a good fit because in Mozambique, MAF is called Ambassador Aviation, and it's a registered Part 135 airline, which in Indonesia it's not yet. So I had prior Part 135 experience flying in Washington. For a couple of years, we lived in Washington right after we were married, and I flew charter flights just anywhere anyone wanted to go. So big airports, grass strips, stuff like that, just in Cessna 206s and 172s, stuff we have in this hangar. So and I wanted to do that job to get practice for MAF and just build my proficiency and my skill.
So that was actually a really great match to have that Mozambique on there. That's cool.
Yeah.
And actually, it's kind of cool to hear you guys kind of see the benefits to two different types of teams and the dynamics there, and like you are willing to be in both kind of thing. And so I'm sure it made the regional directors' jobs maybe not easier, but a little more hopeful. Like, oh yeah, like we can put them in any dynamic, and they would adjust to that. They're willing to do that. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So now that you were with MAF, you get assigned to Mozambique. You go to Mozambique. What year did you guys go to Mozambique?
So we went to language school first in Portugal in February of 2020.
Okay.
And so we were...
That was a great year.
In the timeline there.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers that year. So we were in Portugal at home doing language school. And then we ended up coming back to the States at the end of October that year. We had our second son, and then worked on our visas to get to Mozambique. But because of COVID, things were being delayed and held up.
Yeah.
And so we didn't end up getting to Mozambique until December of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you finally get there with your two sons, and how was that? Like those initial, the initial first few weeks, few months, and then going further in, like how was that experience for you guys?
I think we were on a high, finally be there, huh?
Yeah, it was really exciting to finally be there.
Yeah.
It was great being able to, get flying and start doing what we had been wanting to do.
Yeah.
For, 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
So that was, really, really a lot of fun getting there for the first time and just living there and meeting the people. And
and so you mentioned Ryan, you were flying Cessna 172s and 206s, right? And were you also flying caravans as well, or?
No. Nope. The first time I flew a caravan was in Mozambique.
Okay. Oh, wow. Whoa, that's great.
But
so there was a lot of training that had to happen?
I wasn't checked out. So when I first got to Mozambique, I flew the 206 basically the whole time I was there.
Okay.
And I started to do caravan training remotely with our international chief pilot.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
In the days leading up to the incident that we will get to.
That we will get to. We might as well just we're starting to talk in a way that's it's starting to kind of bleed into that. So I mean, the stories are starting to bleed together a little bit. So December 2021, you guys are there. You're excited. You're kind of getting into the groove of things. You're starting to get trained into the caravan, which is, I'm sure, is great for the team, right? That there's going to be another pilot who can fly the caravan as well.
Yeah.
Actually, before we get into Annabelle, so what? Oh my goodness, sorry, just totally hit the microphone. What did life look like for you during that time? Like when Ryan would fly and fly passengers and cargo around the country of Mozambique, and what was your days look like?
Yeah, so when we arrived, we had Elias, who was 2.5, and Hezekiah turned 1 a week and a half after we arrived.
Great names, by the way. I love those names. So cool.
We do too. So my days really weren't probably a whole lot different than they would be if we were in the States at that point, because 2 young boys need a lot of care and attention. A lot of things need to be made from scratch. We don't have any fast food. We don't, there's certain things you can't buy in the stores that you could buy here. And so just a lot of my time was in the house, hanging laundry, taking care of the boys, and getting accustomed to Mozambique culture.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the whole thing, making everything from scratch. Was that quite the challenge to do, or did you kind of
I enjoy being in the kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah. I took up sourdough making while I was there too. So
That's
our
great.
sourdough pizza crusts were a hit on the team. Yeah.
That sounds so good. So that's probably something that they're all looking forward to when you guys go back later.
I hope so. I'm looking forward to
it. It was really good.
Pizza bag. So, okay. I just wanted to, so that we can understand. I don't want to just sound like Ryan flies and then, we don't get to give you any kind of platform to talk about what your days were like. So, but I totally get that. 2 young boys, we have 2 boys and they're 25 months apart.
Okay.
So it's oh my gosh, those when they were 2.5 and half 6 months or whatever, and it's oh my gosh, this is so much work.
It is.
It's so much, and but at the same time, it's so much. It's so great, you know, when they're that close, and then they start to become friends, and then they grow up together, and our kids now are 10 and 8, and they miss each other when one is not around, and it's great to hear that from them. They are best buddies. But they're also brothers, so they get into a lot of fights too.
Definitely.
So, you
can relate.
So I get it. So anyway, but again, December 2021, you get there finally, and you're going through, and then I guess it was 11 months later, right? Not even a full year. Ryan, why don't you kind of lead us into this story that happened in November of 2022?
Yeah. So it was 11 months after we got there, and I'd been flying operationally for 8 months. So checked out flying by myself for 8 months. So at Ambassador Aviation, we have a yearly flight to resupply an orphanage up in the province of Cabo Delgado.
Okay.
Which is the northernmost province of Mozambique.
Yeah.
It's right above where we are in Nampula, where we're based.
Yeah. And that's there's a lot of instability in that area. Is that correct? Or
that's right.
Okay.
Yep. So about it was in 2018. There was an ISIS terrorist cell that kind of got going in the area.
Yeah.
And they've been wreaking havoc since then, basically. I don't know I think it made international news a few times where the terrorists took over the city of Palma, and there's a lot of talk about the Afungi natural gas plant, which is the biggest natural gas field in all of Africa. And so there was a lot of politics surrounding this area.
Sure.
And a lot of fighting.
And in the midst of that, there's an orphanage there that you guys help supply, which is awesome. Really cool to hear about.
So the orphanage is a little bit outside the area that's usually the hot zone. So I don't think there's ever been fighting near the orphanage, but it's in the same province.
Sure.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we do this flight once a year. And the way that this flight works is volunteers from South Africa drive these goods to resupply the orphanage from South Africa to a city called Inhambane in southern Mozambique.
Oh, okay.
And the orphanage hires Ambassador Aviation to go down and pick up those goods and fly it all the way back up to the orphanage.
Yeah, that is actually that's a lot of flying.
Yeah, it's a long flight. It's I think it's 400 or 500 miles.
Oh man,
maybe 600. Have to review the facts on that.
Yeah.
It's a long flight.
We'll fact check you later.
Yeah. In a small plane, it takes all day to fly down there, or maybe even 2 days if the weather's bad.
Oh, just to fly down south to that spot.
Yeah.
And
so,
then
a day each way, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's pretty far away from home. And it's an area that MAF or Ambassador Aviation is not known. So whenever we go down there, nobody knows who we are.
Yeah.
Which probably plays a role in what happened also.
Sure. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I got assigned this flight. So I'm building my flight hours and experience on the program. So I got assigned all the longer flights. And, this is my first time doing this. And it's a yearly thing. So they thought, okay, let's get him going on it. So he has experience doing this yearly thing. So I flew down there. It took me 2 days to fly down there because of the weather.
Wow.
And when I got there, I spent the night with the two South African volunteers that brought the goods from South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Their names are Eric and Willem. And I'd get to know these guys really well.
Yeah. Had you met them before?
I had never met them before.
Okay.
This is the first time. So, yeah. So I'll kind of get through this because otherwise I'll get bogged down in all the details.
Sure.
Yeah. So basically in the morning, we tried to get the goods through security and at the airport to load them on the plane. And the security officer took issue with the vitamins that we were carrying. The orphanage ordered a bunch of vitamins, maybe like 30 bottles of just various types.
Sure.
So they weren't really like medicine. It was just vitamins.
It's like supplemental type.
Supplements and stuff like that.
Little pills you take or something like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Things you buy.
Omega-3s, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. You buy at any kind of local grocery store here in the States, at least.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So they seem to think that we needed a permit for this. And the details aren't really clear of whether or not we did. But I think it turns out that we didn't quite need a permit for what we were doing, but they thought we did. And so that caused an issue, and they would not let us load the stuff onto the plane.
Okay.
So, after about 3 hours of trying to negotiate and get them, to let us load, a decision was made to bring us all to the police station, and they took away our phones and our passports.
Okay.
And told us, go get in your car and follow us to the police station. So now things were getting, this is the first sign of a problem. You know?
Okay. Yeah. And was that like red flags really going off in your head, or I guess red alarms or whatever?
At this point, not really. This kind of stuff happens a lot in places like Mozambique. It's not uncommon for there to be issues with the police or with customs or stuff like that. That usually these things just resolve themselves.
Yeah.
Once,
it's not like you were
once we reach an
anything,
understanding of what's going on. And
it's like usually you can be just fully transparent, and it's like, these are just vitamins, and then it gets resolved.
Yeah, exactly.
So
so we got to the police station, and basically we were there all day long, and they were taking down our information and stuff. So it seemed like they were kind of booking us, which was a little bit concerning to me. And again, I'm not going to get into there's a lot of details.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not going to get into, but basically there was a lawyer that was called by the police for us. They called us a lawyer, and he said that there would be no problem except that they're concerned about the destination of these vitamins, which is the province of Cabo Delgado.
Oh, okay.
And that's where the terrorist activity is. So they basically thought we could be flying these vitamins to the terrorists. And that was the root of all this problem.
Okay.
So at that point I thought, okay, well, it's very unlikely that they're going to accuse us of that.
Yeah.
Because, that doesn't make sense. So we were again just going to kind of wait it out, and I was not expecting it to go any further than just going before the judge, explaining what happened, and then they'd let us go. So we stayed 3 nights behind the police station over the weekend.
Okay.
In a little cell.
Okay.
And with other prisoners.
Yeah. 3 nights. Oh my gosh.
We weren't technically under arrest, but they weren't going to let us go either. So we're just kind of in this no man's land of
sure.
You don't know what's going on with us.
Oh man.
But anyways, on Monday we saw the judge, and we told our stories separately, truthfully. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that hearing, the judge said that it all sounds like terrorism to him, basically. And he's going to put us under arrest until pending an investigation. So at that point, that's when it got really real. I'm like, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. And then, so Annabel, for you, were you getting news update, not news updates, getting updates about this as it was unfolding up to this point, or did you just find that out on that following Monday, after the weekend was over? Your husband's not back. I was like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I was getting updates. So I knew that he was supposed to fly back on Friday with the goods. And sometimes I help with flight following. Sure. And so I can see if the airplane's taken off or not.
Okay.
And so I knew it hadn't. And so I was trying to get a hold of him because he needed to take off early in the morning to try to make it back.
Yeah.
And I was trying to get a hold of him, and there was one time in mid-morning where he said, we're having some problems with paperwork. I don't think we're going to be taking off today. Still, by the end of the day, I hadn't heard from him. And so I think it was somewhere around dinner time where I got news from one of our teammates, our country director, and he let me know the kind of what was going on, and that they took him to the police station and stuff like that. And then I was able to talk with Ryan that night a little bit, and I think a couple of times over the weekend, we were able to talk as well.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I mean, so Ryan, you mentioned there's a lot of details about this entire thing, but maybe maybe in a very large nutshell, can you tell us what happened for the next 6 months? This basically spiraled further and further down into a worse situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we were arrested that day, and we were taken to a city jail. And I remember riding to jail and in the back of a truck surrounded by police.
Yeah.
And 2 of our national staff from Ambassador Aviation came down to help me get out of trouble. And those 2 men were very, very loving towards me, and they did everything they could to help the situation get better. But one of the guys jumped in the back of the truck with me.
Oh, really?
And rode with me to jail.
Wow.
And, encouraged me.
Yeah.
But during that ride, I just remember thinking okay, I have no idea where I'm going. I have no idea what a Mozambican prison is going to be like. I don't know if I'm going to survive. I don't know if I'm going to come out alive, or I don't know what the treatment's going to be or what. But at that point, I said, Lord, what's going on. And even if I don't survive this, I'm going to trust in you through this whole thing. And at that point, I just had a piece of what was going to happen.
Okay.
Then it's okay, I'm not.
Yeah. I was going to ask.
I'm not the one running the show here. I'm in God's hands.
Yeah.
And I trust him.
That's awesome that God essentially met you there in that prayer, and reassured you there. That's really great. That's really cool. And then were the 2 South African men there with you in that same vehicle?
So they were arrested too, and they were in the same vehicle.
Okay.
And basically through the whole experience, they were, with me. We were in different cells most of the time, but they considered our case one case. They didn't separate the 3 of us out or anything.
Okay.
We're all together. We're all accomplices of the same crime or whatever.
Yeah.
So they kept us all together, basically.
Yeah. And so you they took you to the city jail, and that
Yeah.
and
So
how long were you there? And like, did they ever move you to other places?
yeah, so I was at the city jail for 2 nights, and then after that they transferred us to the provincial jail.
Okay.
So I stayed in the provincial jail a week, and there I got pulled out to go be present while they inspected the airplane and investigated the airplane.
Oh, okay.
And there's so many like little God stories that I wish I had time to tell them all. But basically, God, like, there's a lot of grace, like, and encouragement, and just random people showing up to show kindness, like, throughout this whole
Oh, really?
time. Like at the airport, they're inspecting the plane, and the airport manager, some guy I've never met before, he was like there, and he was basically like, every time they would find a something they were concerned with in the airplane, like a radio in the survival kit or something like that, the manager would step in and say, okay, that's just a survival radio, and he would like come to bat for me, and my lawyer was there also, really great lawyer, and he was really doing his best to keep me out of trouble.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of things. But anyways, so I was in that provincial jail for a whole week, and then I was transferred to a maximum security prison in the capital of the country.
Oh my goodness.
Maputo.
Okay.
So once we got to the maximum security prison, we were there for 4 months before they released us.
Oh my goodness. 4 months in the maximum security.
Yeah.
What did that look like? I mean, what describe for us like what the maximum security prison is, like where you were staying in?
So the maximum security prison was the nicest of the previous of the 4. So I was held in 4 different cells or different jails basically, and it was the nicest one. So we were in the most secure part of the most secure prison in the whole country. And this is the area where you have to do something really bad to get into.
Yeah.
But because of that, the treatment the conditions were nicer. Like I had my own cell and my own bed with the actual mattress, and my own shower, my own toilet, my own sink.
Okay.
And it wasn't overcrowded. So that was, I was in a cell by myself.
Yeah. Where the other places were very much that like one large area, and they just threw everyone in there. And
the provincial jail. Yeah, there were 33 of us in a room.
Oh man,
all sleeping on the floor. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, the conditions weren't fun there.
Yeah. But did you ever feel like your safety was compromised, or you didn't feel safe there?
So that's one of the weird things is I've never felt like afraid of the other prisoners or the guards or anything during the whole detainment. It just wasn't a thing. Like I wasn't afraid of my safety.
Interesting.
I think the prison culture in Mozambique is a lot different than what we would see in movies here or how it is here in the States.
Yeah.
I think just from the culture, the prisoners treat each other like family.
Oh, really?
And they take care of each other. And it's like, we're all in this together. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've done. Like, we're all in this together. We're going to be a community and survive,
Oh, interesting.
Which is more of like an African culture than here.
Did you interact? So there was a lot of interaction that you had with the prisoners during that time, and like it was very like kind of like a camaraderie that you guys had with each other, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Did they know who you like? Did you ever tell them like who you were, like, and what you did?
Yeah, they were very interested to know why, American was thrown in with them, and that was a great opportunity to share, like, that I was with MAF and we're in Mozambique to share the love of Jesus Christ with people.
Yeah. And,
I had a lot of good conversations, sharing my faith with people, using the situation like, I'm in here. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm here, but I'm trusting in God because he's my God.
Yeah.
And, he loves me, and he's, here's what the Bible says and stuff like that. So it was okay. It was a lot of fun sharing with prisoners.
Yeah. Well, that's actually really cool. And so, I mean, Annabel, during this whole thing, I imagine, so it's 4 months in maximum prison, but then there was like a couple weeks maybe of time in those other ones. And like this whole time, like Annabel, how were you doing? And what unfolded for you and your kids during this whole thing?
Yeah, so that first weekend when he was just being held at the prison, we very much thought that once Monday came around that, everything would go back to normal. Like we'd get it cleared up and he'd be on his way home. So Monday night when I got the call that they were accusing him of terrorism, I never expected to hear that word in relation with Ryan.
Yeah.
So that was a surprise.
Oh, man, that's actually kind of funny to see.
So I was kind of like in shock at first, and then the tears came, and it was very much, everything going through my mind of, am I going to be raising the kids alone? I don't know how long a sentence for someone committing terrorism would be.
Yeah.
So I'm picturing the boys basically growing up without a father, and it was really hard to like grapple with at that time. And the thought came to me like, this is a situation where our faith really becomes real. And like, I need to decide now at the beginning of all this, how am I going to go through this situation? Am I going to like cling to God, or am I going to just, let my emotions overcome me and let everything, let me be tossed by the wind, that kind of thing. And so I was like, no, I know that God is who he says he is, and I'm going to lean on him and trust in him in this. And so that, I think, helped me set the precedent for the rest of the experience.
Okay.
So then I was able to talk to Ryan off and on when he was in different jails for those 2 weeks. And then when he was transferred to the maximum security prison, it was done in a way, we found out later it was a secret police. It's just the way they transfer high security prisoners.
Sure.
But we didn't know that. So they didn't tell anybody. These armed, unmarked men show up at the prison and take him. And so we don't know where he's going. Is he being kidnapped? Is this official?
Oh my goodness.
And so MAF made the decision that we needed to evacuate me and the sons.
Okay.
Me and my sons. From
naturally.
Yeah. So the thought was like, we don't know if you guys are in danger. And then they also wanted to get word to Ryan that we were safe, so that nobody tried to use us against him to try to get a confession or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it was less than 24 hours after that decision was made that the boys and I were on a plane. And that moment, again, I was like struggling between, I have to leave for his safety, but also it feels weird to leave him in a country.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not abandoning him, but it almost feels like that in a way. And
that's fair to, to feel like, to question that. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, that would go through my mind too. Like, is this really the right thing to do?
Right.
And so.
Yeah, I remembered something because Ryan was able to pass notes to our national staff who were visiting him. And one of the notes he said was that he knows that God is with him. And that came to my mind when I was struggling in the plane of like, God stays with him and God is going with us because he's present everywhere,
Yeah.
And so that helped me be able to get to the U.S.
Yeah.
So then we came to Idaho and stayed in MAF housing for the next 4 months until he was released.
Yeah, until he was released. So, I mean, Annabelle, I'm gonna ask you another question. Sorry, Ryan. You did so much talking. It's time for Annabelle.
Skip my popcorn.
What really interested me when you were talking, Annabelle, is that like you set a precedent. Like you told yourself, like you asked yourself that question. This is this is a place where I need to really figure out what I want to do with, like, how do I want to approach faith? Am I going to, like what you said, right? But 4 months is a long time. And I mean, that's how long you were there, Ryan, but that's not how long you didn't know that. It could have been longer, right? And were there ever any moments where your faith was starting to shake? And like, how did you setting that foundation initially at the very beginning? How did that play a role in you solidifying that faith again?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I don't think I ever questioned like who God was or my
Sure.
faith. I think because
Yeah.
I had such a strong foundation. We can even look back to the year prior to Ryan being arrested, and we see how God had been using various just things, Christians we were reading and pastors we were listening to in
Yeah.
that time. And I was really into the Elizabeth Elliot podcast. And so I think there was this good foundation of who God was. And I had seen him in my life and in the lives of other Christians prove who he was and his
Sure.
faithfulness.
Yeah.
So I think after that point, I didn't really question who he was. There were definitely hard moments of like I hadn't talked to Ryan in 40 days because he was in solitary confinement.
Oof.
And so like that was really hard, not knowing if or when I'd be able to talk to him again, and different requests we were making to get him released for on like probation, and like those getting shot down over and over again. So there were hard times that I had to wrestle through, but because I had the foundation of my faith in God and my relationship with him and the Christians around me who were, you know, holding me up and praying for me and encouraging me through scripture and hymns. And I think those things helped me to stay firm and be able to get through the hard times.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Ryan, how about yourself? I mean, I mentioned the idea that like, yes, we know the end of the story, obviously, just sitting here talking with us, right? But in those moments when you're sitting in solitary confinement for 40 days, you don't know, like, you just don't know what the end is going to be, right? God knows that, but you don't. Were there ever any times where there was maybe doubts or maybe frustrations towards your situation and maybe like thoughts of questioning God and any of that? Like, was there any moments like that, and how did God meet you there or sustain you through that?
Yeah. One of the things I had to struggle with was kind of what we were just talking about is, God, and I knew this. I knew that God didn't have to release me. I know that we don't always get a happy ending as Christians, physically, right? Spiritually, we absolutely always get a happy ending as Christians. And that's why Jesus died for us. And so that we could have fullness of life and have everything we need spiritually.
Yeah.
But the reality is, Christians around the world, are in poverty.
Yeah.
And they're persecuted and, separated from families, and they never see each other again. And it's just a reality. And I knew that. And, it helps, shape an understanding of, how valuable our faith is. If God is, willing to allow his people to suffer through things like this, that means that God knows that our faith is worth more than anything in the world. And doesn't make it easy though.
Yeah.
Because, I miss my family, and the thought of sitting in jail for, I think it was 24 to 28 years did not sound like a pleasant aspect.
Was that the,
I think that was
the potential if you were convicted?
Yeah, I think 28 is like the maximum they can legally do.
Yeah.
And if you're cooperate, it was 24 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I knew that, there's a chance that this is my home for the next 28 years.
Yeah.
And, I had to wrestle with, would I still trust God and worship God if that happened? And it just made me realize, even if that did happen, it'd be worth it in an eternal sense.
Sure.
Because our faith is worth more than the world.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that makes sense. But
No, it does. Like, and we were talking about this before we hit the record button on the cameras and the audio. But it reminded me a lot about Joseph, like this story of this man who was, I guess he was a boy when he was first arrested, right? Like he was not even 20. And he was put in these really horrible situations and found himself in prison for something he did not do, and it just reminded me of I guess your guys' situation. And the idea that Joseph was put in prison for something he didn't do, and it was this horrible thing that he's being accused of, and he's serving time, and he doesn't know how long he's going to be there. But you read those passages in Genesis, and it doesn't seem like there's any. Like he just didn't. Joseph didn't ever have this like tone or personality that felt like he was victimized in it. He just he did the best of what it was offered him, and he hinged his faith on the promises that God made to his forefathers, right?
Yeah.
And I love what you said, Ryan. Like we have this hope, and it's not like a hope that is I hope that I get to have pizza for dinner tonight. It's not that kind of hope. We have a hope in something that is already guaranteed, and we can hope in that, and we can put our faith and our trust in someone because the promises that he's made in the past. I think you both were talking about like missionaries or Christians even in the past who suffered a lot, and yet they didn't waver in their faith, or maybe they wavered, but they stood in their faith at the end of the day, kind of thing. And it's just really cool. I mean, it's great to hear how God really took care of you guys, and reminding you that eternity is on the other side of this life,
right?
And so, well, how about your kids? How were they through this whole thing?
Yeah. So Hezekiah he turned 2 while Ryan was in jail. So he was still young, didn't fully grasp everything. Sure. Definitely we saw prior to this, we were noticing that Hezekiah would get a second wind whenever Ryan would come home at the end of the day. He'd suddenly have another burst of energy. So I did see that went away, and he just kind of mellowed for a bit. Eventually came back to himself. So that's probably like the most for Hezekiah.
Yeah.
And then Elias was 3.5 at the time. And he's a deep thinker. He feels things deeply. At first, because Ryan, we knew it was going to be an overnight flight, and then he got delayed by weather. And so it was an extra night. Like Elias knew that he wasn't going to be home this night. He wasn't going to be home the next night. So I kind of kept that going, like, oh, Daddy won't be home again. His plane got stuck. Yeah. So Grandpa Rolland, who's the country director on our team, they call him Grandpa. Is like Grandpa Rolland's trying to help get Daddy in the airplane home so we can be praying. And then when we came to the U.S., it was, we're going to go on an adventure. We're going to go see snow because it was wintertime. Yeah. Go see snow. And so they still call the house we stayed in during that time the Adventure House.
That's actually really great. Yep. I love that.
So I kind of kept it at that, though, that the airplane was stuck, and so Daddy was stuck too, which wasn't wrong because they did hold the airplane as well. But once news went public and things were being talked about a lot, and I'm getting updates, and he hears things and he internalizes and thinks about them, and so even though he wasn't able to express it at the time that I know more is going on, I knew that he knew, and so I explained to him that Daddy was being in jail because some people were telling lies about him, and so we could be praying for Daddy to be released. And for Hezekiah's birthday, I had bought him a storybook of the prisoners in the earthquake. It was Paul and Silas, thank you. Yeah. My brain blanked. Paul and Silas in jail, and the earthquake happened, and the jailer came to know Christ. And so they loved it. They had me read it all the time. They didn't know that Ryan was in jail at that time. But when I'm talking to Elias, Hezekiah runs and grabs the book and brings it over to me. And then they start talking about how we need to pray for the jailer.
Wow.
And so,
oh man.
Yeah. Kids' hearts,
Sorry, I'm like not trying to get emotional.
Yeah, me neither.
That's really great.
Yeah,
that's a really great story.
Yeah, so I hope that the way that we handled it and those around us encouraged us during that time, I hope that impacts them. Yeah, in the long run, they see that God was faithful to keep us strong and yeah.
Well, you guys. So 4 months goes by, you get released. And then, so how does the reunification happen for you guys as a family? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Or what did that look like?
Yeah. So I think it was 2 weeks after I was released. Annabelle and the boys flew back to Mozambique with our vice president of the people group. Trying to get all these roles kind of changed recently, so I have to think about it.
Going on, organizationally.
So the vice president of the people group flew back with them, and we were reunited at the airport. So we set it up so that I'd be in a room while they went through all their visa processes and got all their luggage, and all that hassle was out of the way. Then we could just have a quiet room to reunite for the first time and not be distracted by all this other stuff. Yeah. And it was just really wonderful to see them again.
Yeah,
and,
I bet. I can only imagine.
Yeah. And it was funny because the boys were just so tired after the 48-hour flight.
Yeah.
And so Hezekiah comes running in. He's just running around the room, just pointing everything out.
Yeah, it's like,
kind of like
right
I'm right here. But I understand. Like, yeah. And it was interesting because he was like a new kid basically from when I last seen him, because he just turned 2 while I was in jail, and like he said a lot of words when I left him, but he was an absolute motor mouth when I reunited with him. So it was like kind of meeting him for the first time, kind of. But it was a great reunification, and we spent the next 6 months at our home in Nampula.
Okay.
I wasn't able to work or drive or anything because, the government said I couldn't work.
You were still under investigation.
And they still had my passport.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was still under investigation.
Yeah.
So they, and I had to report to the police station every 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, you get to just be, a dad at home for all that time. That might be, I mean, you had a lot of time to make up for being with your family and like just bonding with your kids and with your wife. And so it must have been, in a way, it probably was kind of a relief, right? Like,
it was good to spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah.
Eventually it became too much time where like,
not too much time with us, but too much time without working.
Sure.
Yeah. I needed an outlet.
Yeah.
And
okay.
So after like sitting around for 6 months, I was like really antsy, and
And then but then you guys eventually came back here to the States, right? And when did that happen?
So that was in October of 23.
23. Yeah.
Okay.
6 months after I was released.
Yep.
I was released in March of 23. So we came back to the States and went on our furlough and started, we saw our friends and family again, and, more reunions and stuff, and a lot of just telling the story of how God was faithful faithful to us, and how he's been with us through it.
Off the top of your head, how many times do you think you told this story over the past year?
I think every time is a little bit different. I say different things. Like I don't have like a set way of telling.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't know.
Got to be like 30.
Like 20 or 30 times. Different parts.
I know we shared, was it 11 times just in California at churches? And that's not like individual one-on-ones when you were talking with people.
Yeah.
And we've shared in other states too.
Yeah.
So it's probably got to be close to 30.
Yeah. And even this week we have 3 schools we're going to speak at.
Yeah.
Which is not usual. This is, we don't speak at schools all the time.
They just all got scheduled this week.
Oh my goodness.
So we have 3 schools and then our church on Sunday.
Just show them this. Just send them the file for this video. And to stay home. Well, I mean, like I was trying to make sure that like you guys didn't have to like retell the story again on this podcast. Mostly because you have told the story a lot of times, and there's a lot of places that you could go, people can go and read it or watch it or listen to it. But I will recommend one on this podcast because I listened to it, and I was in preparation for this episode, and it was excellent. I thought it was really great. The Flying for Life podcast that MAF in the UK produces had you guys on,
right?
And you guys went into a lot of detail about the whole thing. And so, guys, if anyone listening or watching this, like, you should totally go to the Flying for Life podcast and look up their episode. It's probably the most recent one.
Yeah, I think it's the most recent one.
And so and listen to that. I mean, you guys talked a little bit about, like, there's some overlap on some things that you guys talked about here, but I mean, there's things that we didn't talk about, like your health during that time and and all that stuff. But I really wanted to use this time to kind of like dig a little bit into like more how did God kind of work in your life to sustain you and to sustain your faith, and then also like going forward, like you guys are still assigned to Mozambique, and you guys are still pretty resolute to go back. And I wanted to start that off by just simply asking, like, why? Because I'm sure MAF would have honored a request to go be reassigned somewhere else. And then you went, because like you said October 2023, you guys got back here, right? So it's been over a year, like what, 15 months that you waited. You could have, I don't know, you could have asked if maybe be reassigned to Indonesia and get back into the get back overseas. But you guys wanted to stay with Mozambique. Like what's driving that for you guys?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons. A lot of different ways you can look at it. I think the ones I want to touch on is, I just want to touch on forgiveness for a second, because I think that's what a lot of people, respond when I tell them that I'm going back is, like after all they've done to you kind of attitude. And, but when I was in jail, I think it was 2 weeks after I got to the maximum security prison, I realized that I hadn't forgiven my captors yet. I'm not talking about like the guards or anything. I'm talking about like the people who are doing this, which I don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
People who's the mastermind behind, trying to prosecute us and put us in jail for terrorism. And I'd prayed a lot about them. Probably more of like imprecatory prayers. But I realized that I hadn't thought about forgiving them and blessing them. And the scriptures come to mind that say, bless and do not curse, and pray for those who persecute you. And vengeance is with the Lord,
Yeah.
So at that point, like I just prayed and I asked God to, forgive them for what they're doing, and asked God to help me forgive them. And I told God that I was forgiving them. And I think I really did. I don't have any hard feelings. If I were to meet the guy, I would shake his hand, and I don't know what I'd say, but I wouldn't be upset.
Yeah.
Like my heart is that he would, just come to know the Lord. And if I could help him do that in some way, I would. But and it's funny because, that same day that I realized I need to forgive them, I met Willem and Eric in the hallway of the prison, and Eric came to the same conclusion on the same day that he needed to forgive also. Yeah. So we were like talking about that in the hallway and stuff, and it was really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I don't have any hard feelings against Mozambique. From a safety perspective, I don't think, and MAF doesn't think that there's any risk of something like this happening again or further repercussions of this situation.
Yeah.
So, we think it's safe to go back in that aspect.
Yeah.
But as far as our desire to go back, we really love Mozambique. We love, I think we love them more now than we did previously, just through the experience. And, for me, just spending time with, the prisoners and kind of seeing their hearts and their needs and their, there's people who need the gospel and who need Jesus Christ in their lives. And, just spending a lot of time with the lowest of the society really just built my love for them. And even seeing our national friends, just literally risking their freedom also to serve me was just really, touching. And, I just want to spend my life there with them, and, another thing is like God has also given us, the skills and the ability to, do what we do there. Like not everyone can go to Mozambique. Not everyone can fly an airplane to Mozambique, but I happen to be able to because of what God has prepared me for, and, we're going to take the opportunity and go back there and keep serving if the Lord wills.
That's great. Annabelle, you have any thoughts on that, or?
No, I echo everything he said. Yeah. It's we definitely see there's a need there for the gospel to go out, and it just, especially in the northern province or the northern half of the country where we live and serve mostly, there's according to the Joshua Project, there's 11 unreached people groups in that area, unreached, unengaged. They don't have scriptures in their language, and so part of what we do up there is bringing Bible translators who will make a difference in that. And so we see, like you said, we see the need there, and God has given us a desire and the ability to go. Yeah. And so we're going to take that opportunity and go.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. It's good to hear that God has really given you a heart for the people there.
Yeah.
And I guess my next question would be, going forward, like, what are your hopes? What are your hopes for Mozambique during your time there and through the ministry of MAF? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but maybe I just wanted to ask it in a different way.
Yeah, we're our team, we're exploring ways to do business as mission in Mozambique. And the reason for that is, the missionary presence in Mozambique has been declining over the years. So there's we don't fly a lot of missionaries all the time. We do. And we flew, like when I was there for the 11 months, I flew Bible translators, and I flew missionaries over the war zone when the roads were closed. And, we helped the mission community greatly during that time. But most of our flights are just flying everyday, businessmen, workers, and, we fly conservationists,
sure,
doctors, patients, and these aren't really Christians we're flying. So it's a great opportunity to, be a light to them in any way that we can. So our team is looking into ways to, how can we effectively reach our passengers as we're flying them? Not just the pilots, but also our staff on the ground, our bookings manager, like every point of contact. Like, how can we, be a light and be able to start meaningful conversations with people. So I'm really excited about going forward with this, mindset and desire to,
that's cool,
to keep reaching people.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And I think that's needed. And I think that probably spoke a lot into, maybe how everything played out with, your time in prison, Ryan. Like, they tried to build a case against you guys, and you couldn't because you had integrity, right? Like, there's nothing here. We were helping this orphanage. Actually, real quick question.
Yeah.
Like, the orphanage, like, did any of this affect them? Like, did the person over there have to get out, or were they brought in or anything like that?
Nope. So that's one of the mysteries of this case, is why they didn't, well, first of all, why they didn't arrest the orphanage manager, and why they didn't take much interest in MAF, since I was obviously an MAF pilot. So they interviewed Roland. The police interviewed Roland just to verify some facts. Like, oh yeah, this guy really works here, stuff like that. But that was just one time. And they went up to the orphanage. They looked at the office there. They looked at the compound. They just verified there actually was an orphanage. They were who they said they were, and all that stuff. So they just verified all these facts, but they made no further arrests, which was very interesting. It made me feel like, well, then why am I in jail still? This was early on.
I mean, it's not like you're wishing that they were got arrested, but at the same time, it's like,
I was
there's
really
no consistency here. It seems weird,
because that was a glimmer of hope that this was just going to eventually end, because they were not making any more arrests. So I was like, okay, most likely we'll probably get out of here at some point.
Okay. I was just curious. I'm like, there was a place this was going to, and I mean, I just never asked the question. I wanted to ask the question. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about that maybe I didn't ask you guys, or we didn't go over?
Yeah. You were mentioning that they realized that there's integrity, and they had to let them go, right?
Sure.
Like, nothing. came to be what they said it was going to be. And they even, we just think it's really cool. In the closing case documents, they actually say in there that they're not terrorists. They didn't do all these things we were accusing them of. But in fact, they are doing humanitarian work, aiding those like the orphans and actually
underprivileged people.
The underprivileged, like actually doing what they're doing, what they said they were doing for religious reasons. And so they through their investigation, they not only realized that they weren't terrorists, but they realized that they are doing good in the country.
Total vindication.
They're aiding the country and helping the people in their own country. So that's
who
actually
knows
really
how
cool.
that impacts those who are doing the investigation to actually
it does open up open up their eyes to like good work that's happening that they did not know about. And so that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, that's actually really cool. Man, you guys are way more gracious than I probably would have been in that. So no, it's great. Praise God for his provisions and his care for you guys. And like he took care of you guys and he loves you deeply, but also at the same time, it's like he's known even further in that country of Mozambique through it all. So like he's getting all the praise and glory through all of it. Yeah. And you guys are very ready to point to him through this experience, which is really quite awesome and really great for you guys to do. So thank you.
Yeah. We're really excited to go back.
Yeah.
Hopefully by the end of the month, we'll be
I was going to say, like,
getting back in.
I think by the time you guys might actually be in Mozambique
We
by the
might
time
be.
this thing releases.
Yeah.
And so, because these usually get released at the end of the month. And so, we'll
could
see.
be on an airplane.
Yeah. If you are, we'll just throw out the whole thing. We won't even release it. It's like, it's outdated. We have to do it again. We'll fly to Mozambique. We'll fly us to Mozambique.
Oh, that works.
Let's do it. Chad, you good for that? Thanks you guys for coming on and talking. We went a little over, but it was really great. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. And guys, if you guys have any thoughts or any comments, definitely leave those in the comment section. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can also email us at podcast@maf.org. And if you want to watch any more episodes, you can find those on maf.org/podcast. So until next time, thanks for watching and thanks for listening, and hope this story was something really inspiring, and definitely look up the Kohers and MAF and know their story, know them a little bit more deeply. Also, I forgot, I will put the link to the other podcast in the show notes. So if you guys are interested in that, you don't have to go digging for that. You can just you can go to our links. So perfect. Anyway, thanks guys. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.